So good afternoon, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Nicole Goldin and I am the director of the CSIS IYF Youth Prosperity and Security Initiative, which if you haven't heard about it, we launched here at CSIS in about mid-January. So we're really thrilled you all can join us for this very timely and important conversation. And also just thanks to those of you that are here in the room and those of you that are joining us online via live stream and following along via Twitter as well. So we're thrilled to have you all to participate in this discussion. As I said, it's both timely and important. It's an important conversation because as you all know, more than half the world's population is under the age of 30, and in the countries and the environments we're particularly here to think about today, youth might represent upwards of 40% of those populations. And when faced with acute unemployment, social exclusion, political exclusion, it really undermines the ability to sort of harness the potential of young people towards inclusive economic growth and stability. So it's a really important conversation, and it's a very timely conversation because as we all saw, young people were central to the recent elections in Kenya, and we're very lucky to have with us here today to sort of reflect on that experience, Silas Maru, who's the president of the National Youth Bunge Association in Kenya, and we're also very lucky to have with us Zipporah Maina, who is the president of the Cheptiret, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Youth Bunge. She'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure. Youth Bunge here with us today to reflect on the Yes Youth Can program as well. I'm also very happy to see you again and honored to have with us, we're really quite lucky to have with us today, Assistant Administrator of USAID for Africa, Earl Gast, who oversees programs in 49 countries in Africa, but as well throughout his illustrious over 20 plus year career at USAID has been mission director in Afghanistan, deputy mission director in Iraq, and served in Eurasia and a number of really, the kinds of environments that we're really thinking about how we build youth inclusive, democracies and societies here. So we're really thrilled to have Earl's perspective. And rounding out our very distinguished panel, we're lucky to have Sharon Morris, who is the director of Youth and Conflict Mitigation Office at Mercy Corps, who is the lead implementer of the Yes Youth Can program, which we are going to hear more about and be able to really draw on some of those experiences and reflect on the lessons of Yes Youth Can and applicability to other environments. So with that, I don't want to take too much time because I'm hoping we'll have lots of time for discussioning and engagement. But I thought I'd start the conversation with you, Earl, and just to get your thoughts on, Yes Youth Can is USAID's, if you're not familiar with it, largest youth program, largest single country youth program. And so what was behind it? What drove USAID to go big in Kenya? And in particular, also, I know you visited the program, your thoughts and reflections. It would be great to hear.
Great, thank you. And with that introduction, I think what Nicole is suggesting that I'm in my post-youth phase of life and career. So why am I here talking about youth? I think it's one of the things that really drove us to come up with what I think is an excellent program with Mercy Corps and actually with the Kenyans themselves is the Yes Youth Can program. And it was really, unfortunately, born out of the violence that occurred after the 2007-2008 elections, where some 1,200 to 1,400 persons were killed as a result of the election violence, and also very alarming the fact that some 600,000 people throughout the country were displaced. And this was an unprecedented time for us because we had so many groups back in Washington and internationally wanting to do things to help Kenyans get back on the right track. And so Congress committed an unprecedented amount of resources to the program to help us develop this. And, it's not that we did anything brilliant. We turned it over to the Kenyans. And so this program is led by the youth. It is managed by the youth. It's implemented by the youth. What we happen to be, through Mercy Corps and other implementing partners, really are the ones who help provide the tools so that they can do the good things that they're doing. What struck me, and I met Silas several times in Nairobi over the last year, and also met his senior team, and I also met people at the Bunge level, at the very basic level of the structure of Yes Youth Can. And what really struck me is the commitment, and I haven't seen this elsewhere, certainly not here in the U.S., but the commitment of youth for community service. And that struck me as something that we should help promote and give them the tools to help do the right things. So I would say that we've been very fortunate. There are definitely lessons to be learned from this, and certainly can be applied in other areas. And in fact, Silas, you and I were talking about perhaps with the African Union, getting a delegation from the African Union that's devoted to the youth policy to come down and see the wonderful things that you're doing in Kenya.
That's great. Thank you. And following on that, Silas, perhaps you can talk about some of the elements of Yes Youth Can that you think really led to and helped foster the peaceful environment that we saw during this last round of elections. And what do you think from your work with Yes Youth Can, how have you seen a change in young people's perspectives over the time you've been with the program?
Yes, First of all, let me just explain a little bit of the tenets that are in the Yes Youth Can program, and specifically on the youth. As you said, we have we are youth-owned, youth-led, and youth-managed. So we have three very important areas, and first of all is the leadership management training. I mean, bringing up the leadership in the youth. So in an effort to bring out that leadership in the youth in Kenya, we were able to start from the village level. When he talks about Bunge, we are actually talking about a small village demarcated by some geographical features, and more often than not, it covers a few square kilometers. So all those youth come together after some mobilization. They come together, they elect their leaders, and they go all the way up to the national level. Of course, the village, they go to the county, and then they go all the way to the national level. So first of all, that helped to ensure that there is that unity among the youth. Youth come together and they are united. They form a network that can be able to solicit for so many other issues other than just them coming together. So the other thing that the other tenet of the program is the Tahidi Youth Fund, and that actually looks into issues to do with the economic development of the youth. And we had grants that went up to $500 per group, which targeted 10,000 village groups. And it was essentially a seed money to ensure that as they come together, they create the networks, they're also able to do something for themselves in ensuring that they get something at the end of the day, and they also give it back to the society. The third tenet is the think tank, where we are actually trying to go into the government, as in we are trying to influence the policies of the government, so much so that all the time when they come up with the policies, youth are already taken at the center stage. So that was just a brief on what it takes. I mean, what is in the structure of the National Youth Bunge Association and the Yes Youth Can program as a whole. So in preventing violence in the just concluded general elections, we have, out of the structure of more than 750,000 youth, that leadership training that they received, that leadership development that they received, we have quite a number of them that actually went out of the system and actually decided to do the politics. Okay, the program is non-partisan, and therefore anytime you want to go into politics, you have to leave the program so that we don't associate ourselves with any political party. So for success, the youth were able to go out, and for now I know 17 of them who got positions from our program. On the Tahiti Youth Fund, during the time when the elections were taking place, youth were able to do something for themselves. Elections are going on and you have your small business that you must run. So essentially they were not idle, because initially youth would be idle and they would easily become an easy target. Yeah, you can easily penetrate and make sure that, you bring chaos within a country that does not require chaos at that particular time. So it was even very expensive to buy a youth this time around, as opposed to initially. It was very expensive, yeah. Initially, you just needed a few coins and the youth will follow your way. But this time around, they had something to do for themselves, and therefore you really needed to cough a lot. And and we were on the think tank side. We were able to mobilize youth to make sure that they participated in presidential watch parties, and they also contributed to the same process. So essentially, that is how we were able to mitigate incidences of violence within the youth fraternity. So when you talk about changes in the youth perspective, basically we are saying that I know of several senators who are actually youth in Kenya, but going by the last general election. And initially that has not been the case. It's always the usual suspects, going back to leadership. And we believe that in the near future, we'll have a new crop of leaders who will be able to see us to the change that we really need. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Silas. Picking up on the economic point, or one aspect of the economic point, I know it's been reported that about 80% of Kenya's unemployed are between the ages of 18 and 34. 80%, it's pretty astonishing. And I know, Zipporah, you did a lot of work through your work with the Bunge, in particular on entrepreneurship and on that piece. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about your work and your experiences and what worked in that regard, and how that connected into some of the broader participation. And also, since we have you for the moment, would love to hear your thoughts in particular on through the Bunge on young women's empowerment and where you saw that in particular successes.
Okay, thank you. As in the Yes Youth Can program, I was able to be trained as a trainer of trainers on entrepreneurship. And in being in that position, I was able to mobilize and form over 20 village bunges. The bunges are the youth groups. And in these groups, I was able to train them on financial literacy, how to develop a business plan, how to develop a business proposal. And in these bunges, they were in a position to be given a micro grant. That is over 10,000 youth groups were given micro grants, which is equivalent to $500 in the Kenyan money. Okay, in this micro grant, the youths were able, because they had that time during the 2007-2008 election, most of the youths were unemployed, most of them were idle. So it was easy for the politicians to manipulate them and use them. But this time around, the Yes Youth Can was in, the youths were empowered, and when the youths were empowered, they were given the micro grant and they were in a position to be independent. And in the micro grant, most of the groups were able to have some income generating activities. And the income generating activities, they were different. They differed according to the interests of the group. because some groups were doing poultry keeping, some were having greenhouses, some were making bricks, and they had a lot of projects that they were dealing in. Okay, concerning the women empowerment. Okay, the program also had a component of gender, and in the component of gender, I was among the mentors for the young women, and we mentored young women, and also we partnered with private sectors. We partnered with Coca-Cola, and young women were able to be given something to do. They were being given freezers and some sodas that they were selling. Again, we had some women outreach campaigns, and in this campaign, women were being told more on their rights, because we know most women don't know their rights as compared to the men. And we know that in our country, Kenya, we see as leadership belongs to men, but it is not that way. It belongs to all of us. The women have equal rights compared to the men. Okay, again, we have equal representation of women in the program, because whenever we had some elections in village bunges, we made sure that they were equal representation, as in we had one, if the chair becomes a man, the vice chair becomes a lady. So that we fought very much, because that will bring about the equal representation of women in the program. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see why you would be a role model to some of the young women in your Bunge. Yeah. Sharon, taking it up one level, given the breadth of your experience across different conflict-affected and fragile environments, what are some of the lessons that you've learned sort of broadly that you've seen in working with youth in these environments?
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. I think Mercy Corps works almost exclusively in transitional environments, so places that are affected by conflict or natural disasters or crises. And after over 30 years of working in these kinds of places, I think we've come to the realization that youth programs that have largely been developed for stable settings don't translate well into transitional environments. Transitional environments are, by definition, very competitive environments. They're places where the rules of the game are changing, where new people are entering the political arena, where economic trends are shifting, where social barriers are being broken down. And these are places where there's tremendous opportunity for positive change, but there are also places where there is sort of an ever-present threat of instability and violence. And I think in looking at a lot of youth programs out there, they're very, very solid, youth economic programs or youth political engagement programs, but they're sort of ignoring some of these transitional trends. And if they don't look at some of these dynamics that happen in transitional states, they're less effective. So to give just a couple of very quick examples, I was in the Niger Delta not long ago, and one of the things we were looking at was youth employment in the Niger Delta. And for markets to function, there needs to be trust. And in many transitional environments, there's a lot of market dysfunction because there is very little trust between different groups. And so in the Niger Delta case, you had a lot of young people who wanted jobs. You had a lot of local private sector who wanted to invest in communities, but there was so little trust between the two groups that it was very difficult to get effective economic activity going. Another very prevalent feature in transitional states we found is, what we've been seeing in the last round of elections in Kenya. Many politicians view young people as nothing more than weapons they can use in their political fight against others. And so a leadership program or an employment program that wouldn't raise an eyebrow in a stable setting becomes very politicized and very high risk in an environment like a Kenya, like a Nigeria, like an Afghanistan. And so I think what we're learning in general about these kinds of programs is, first, you have to be very, very aware of the dynamics that are occurring in transitional states. You have to adapt your programs to directly engage with those dynamics. You can't just ignore them or your programs won't work. And you do have to accept that these are going to be quite high-risk programs. I think a lot of people look at youth programs and think, you know, happy, smiling pictures of youth, and, you know, they're feel-good programs. And this is a very feel-good program in many ways. It was also a high-risk program in many ways.
And just picking up on that and following up, Sharon, how did you take those lessons, and what did that mean for the design of Yes Youth Can and the implementation, and what was so unique about Yes Youth Can to respond to some of these challenges and some of these risks?
There are a couple of things about the Yes Youth Can program that I think are interesting. Some have already been mentioned. The first is that it was very explicitly designed to be youth-led. And I think it's been enormously successful in that respect. You heard Silas talk about how, is it 17 now? It was 12 just the other day, so I think more results are coming in. But 17 of the leaders in this program were elected to office, and that's just extraordinary. I think, you know, youth-led is something that a lot of groups pay lip service to, but I think making it real is quite challenging. And I think, you know, again, we also have to look at the fact that youth leadership is difficult. Just like adults, there are some youth leaders who are fabulous, and there are some youth leaders who maybe aren't as fabulous and do some things that are difficult. And finding authentic youth leaders is also quite difficult. So one of the things I like about this program is it did start at a very grassroots level, and it really tried to allow the young people to choose their own leaders. Another thing that I think is very interesting about this program, and actually we have one of our colleagues in the audience who maybe can talk about it a bit more, you know, this program really tried to reach scale. When you're trying to deal with things like electoral violence, doing a small little boutique youth program in one area isn't going to do much. It may be peaceful there, but the rest of the country could blow up. And so we really did try and reach scale. Part of that was the size of the grant. It was a very large grant. But a huge part of that was the use of social media and new technologies to reach out to youth in very aggressive and very creative ways. So that's another, I think, quite unique element to the program. Just the third thing, sorry to wrap up on this. You know, I think one of the lessons we learned is that, you know, this is an integrated program. And it started out very much sort of tilted towards the entrepreneurship side, but leadership was always a very important part of it. So that as elections approached, you know, we could sort of pivot from a jobs focus to a leadership focus. And I think that integrated nature was very important.
It's really interesting. I'm going to come back to Silas and Zipporah in a second, but on that note, Earl, coming back to you for a follow-up and picking up on that point about being scale and holistic, I happen to know firsthand that USAID at the end of the year launched its first ever policy on youth and development, which is very exciting, and many of the elements of that policy were intended to really apply specifically to programming and how to think about programming for young people in a holistic way, you know, across sectors and economic opportunity and civic and political engagement, but in particular in transitional or conflict-affected environments. So given your sort of vast experience and your view on the Yes Youth Can, you know, Kenya situation in particular, can you share some thoughts on how you think that policy, you know, and what it says about programming in these environments, you know, resonates with you?
Yeah, no, I know that you have firsthand experience in developing USAID's first ever youth policy, and I think it's interesting because the development of Yes Youth Can was taking place as this policy was being shaped. Yeah. So it was an interesting dynamic because the policy was helping to influence the program, and the program was helping to shape the policy. But just building on Sharon's point, and that is something that really I think was phenomenal in this program, and something I haven't seen in programs around the world, and that is in such a rapid fashion building this program up to scale. And that is something that we struggle with in AID. Often we have very good boutique programs or very good local programs, but it's very difficult to build upon those. And certainly having a large grant helped, but it was the mobilization aspect, whether it was through social media or other traditional ways of mobilizing persons, as well as the commitment, the tremendous commitment on the part of the youth in Kenya that made this a success. So it's something that we definitely want to take that positive experience and look at ways of replicating, not necessarily Yes Youth Can, but building something positive to scale in a quick fashion. And so that's certainly something that is covered in our youth policy. But also the youth policy does talk a lot about and focus on areas of fragility, instability. And so I've worked in some unstable environments. In fact, Mike and I were part of the first group that went into Iraq back in 2003, and we didn't have a youth policy. And so what we were trying to do was trying to, in a very quick fashion, return a sense of normalcy. And for us, that meant getting kids back to school. And that was one element that's certainly featured in this program, but it's not enough. And it was only over time that we started to begin to understand that when you have an economy collapsing and you see unemployed youth who are quickly taking up arms, that we had to do something about it. So that was a learning experience for all of us, and something that Sharon also mentioned that I wanted to touch upon, and that is to be careful of doing no harm. And that means in fragile environments that we really have to understand the macro environment as well as the micro environment. And by that I mean, when I was in Afghanistan recently, a couple of years ago, we had really good programming taking place at the local level, but there was the sense of tribal capture. And that meant that one tribe was benefiting from the delivery of our program over another, and that just exacerbated the situation. So it really means that we have to be very smart about our programming.
Such an interesting point, this idea of recognizing that youth aren't, a monolithic group in any place. I mean, there's a lot of diversity within the youth cohort, and I think it's really important to take that into account when thinking about programming in any environment, and in particular, I think in some of these environments. And going back to you, Silas, I wanted to pick up on some of the comments Sharon was making about some of the challenges you see generally, and wanted to, in your work at the national level, what were some of the challenges you saw in this being a youth-led and youth-led, youth-owned, youth-managed program, and in your work as sort of the leader of these at the national level? What were some of the challenges you saw?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you once again. As I said initially, we have the leadership aspect, we have the economic aspect, and we also have the policy aspect in our program. So, first of all, when you talk about the fact that the program is owned by the youth, managed and led by the youth, in the leadership it's purely youth. In the economic part of it, it's purely youth. In the policy, it's purely youth. The only thing that Mercy Corps does for us is just facilitation when we need to do 1, 2, 3 things. So essentially everything is youth-owned, led, and managed completely. So on the challenges that we faced at the national level, there are quite a number, and I must say that initially the greatest challenge that we faced was the fact that the political elite thought that someone really wanted to overthrow the government, and therefore there was need to make sure that the registration of these people does not go through. Because, okay, like, for example, as the National Youth Bunge Association, we got our registration certificate hardly 4 months ago. You realize that the program has been on for quite a while, but we got our certificate 4 months ago. So basically we are saying that if you are not registered with the government, you cannot transact any business. So that is one of the biggest challenges that we faced, and we were able to always knocked at the door of the government, all those relevant ministries that we could partner with, and eventually they realized that these people were not up to overthrowing the government as such. So the other challenge, of course, is development stages of any organization. We as NYBA, we grew very fast. As Ala just said, we grew very fast, and of course, there's that fear that it can crumble back to nothing once the Mexico leaves. And of course, that is part of the area that we are looking into to ensure that as we transit from the current leadership to the next leadership, and of course, as Mexico leaves and as our donors leave, we want to ensure that the program actually continues. And by so doing, to do that, we are really trying to make sure we go back to the youth and make sure that they actually own the process. They own they own the program per se. So and how to do that is to make sure that they contribute actively. If you have to go back into your pocket and give out something, that means you really have to look into what is going on, so that to make sure that whatever you gave out does not go to the blues. All the time when money comes from the donor, and it's a donor's money and we can spend it, and when all is done, nobody to answer to. But if it's from your pocket, you'll really follow it up and try to know what happened to my $1 that I gave out last time. Yeah. So the other thing, of course, is unemployment that is, of course, rampant all over the world. And we see a conflict of interest in NYBA because you are here trying to fend for yourself, for your life, and the program is completely voluntary. I mean, you go into the program and you're not paid anything, and you need to put your time in there. So that is a potential area where we are seeing probably we need to work on very seriously to make sure that if the program should stand, maybe we should move from completely voluntary to having something to subsidize on the time they are spending on the same. So of course, one other area that we saw had potential threat is, we had the social media, we had the communication line that was very well created, but there are instances when someone would want to misuse and, of course, misinform the people. So we really worked to make sure that we are guarding, at the same time we're giving them the freedom to give out the information they need to give out. So those are some of the few challenges that we faced, and if I were to continue, I would really enumerate quite a number of them. Yeah, but we are really working on each and every of those problems that we've already encountered, and those that will come in the course of as we go on with developing the structure of National Youth Bunge Association.
Thanks. And just to clarify one point, we talked about the rapid scale up of the Bungis. Can you remind us how many there actually are? How many Bungis there are across Kenya?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, if I would give you a figure right now, but probably to not be the right figure as I speak, but I'll give you a most recent figure. We are going towards 1 million youth in the program. The last time I checked, it was just about 1 million. We have about 20,000 registered youth groups in the movement, and I think I told you what a village bunge is. So we have about 20,000 groups registered. And in that, we also have 25 counties. Out of the possible 47 counties, we have 25 counties in the program. And I think I should have said that we are also trying to roll out to the remaining counties to make sure that, because the initial hotspots, when they came, did their research, the initial hotspots have turned. Now we have new hotspots, we have areas that need to be delved into. So we want to increase the number of membership from 25 to a possible 47 in the near future. Basically that.
Great, thank you. Zipporah, going from the national level to your leadership in the Bunge that you led, what were some of the day-to-day challenges that you saw in leading, a specific Bunge and working with young people in your immediate communities?
Okay, like for my village Bunge, it's a cosmopolitan group. And the group, the place where I am was a hotspot. It was a hotspot area during the 2007-2008 election. And some of the challenges that we are facing with the youths in my community is that most of the youths in the community are not patient. Yeah, I mean, when the youths form youth groups, and you are telling them, okay, after you have formed a village youth group, you will be given some funds. So they are like, if you form today, the next day you will be given funds, and it is not that way. Okay, some youths have wrong intentions in that some youth groups, when they are given money, they are not going to do the right thing. They misappropriate the funds. So it becomes a very big challenge because you give them money, you are telling them, go and start this project. Instead of doing that project, the whole group decide that we are going to share up the money, and at the end of the day, it becomes horrible. Okay, another thing is that as a youth leader, in Kenya, we know all our politicians, they are the ones who, when they are given a ministry, they are the ones first to benefit themselves. So the youths there think that, okay, as a president of my village, Bunge, when money is given, I'll be the first beneficiary to take the money and eat. So it becomes a challenge when you are trying to tell them that the money should be used this way and this way. They say, no, you are the first one to get the money, so you have just used the money. And yet they don't know that there are some procedures that we should follow. Again, we have another problem with the youths in the community. They don't like volunteer work. If you tell them you are going to do some work volunteering, they say no. That is something they cannot do. They just want something that they can do and be given something to put into their pockets. Okay, concerning the issues for youths in my community is that most of the youths in the community are unemployed. So that becomes also another issue, because most of them have completed their high school or the university, but they are not employed. Again, accessing to opportunities and linkages. It is a very big problem because some of the youths cannot access opportunities. They cannot even get linkages, so that becomes another problem. Okay, another problem is on education. Some youths would like to continue with their studies, but there is no more funds or no money for them to continue with their education. Again, you find that in the business sector, some youths might be having good business ideas, but you find that they don't have capital to start the businesses. So that also becomes another key issue in the community. Again, the sustainability. Sustainability politically is inclusive because that also becomes a very key issue in the community, because youths are people who want things to be done instantly, like a remote. If it is to be done this way, they want instantly, and it cannot work that way. So those are some of the issues that I've seen around my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Zipporah. I think it's interesting that some of the issues that you saw in your community in Kenya were some of the similar issues and things that, Earl, you observed outside of Kenya and beyond. Yeah. So with that, let's take some questions. We've got some time. Let's take a few questions from you all, I'm sure. Yes, in fact. We'll take 3 questions, and then we'll let the panel address them.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Williams. I'm with the National Cooperative Business Association, CLUSA International. We're also implementers of Yes Youth Can in the Coast, and most recently in Nairobi region. So I've had a chance to go out to Kenya and visit and see the wonderful work being done in YYC. So I have some questions for Silas and Zipporah. First question would be, I'm really surprised, Zipporah, to hear your comment about the youth not wanting to be volunteers, because I feel like what I saw and witnessed in Kenya was the exact opposite. There was this huge spirit of volunteerism, and I was very, very much impressed with that. So I'm a bit curious about what county you live in, and if that's something that's unique to your region. And then in general, I would like to know about both of your experiences in your bunges, and whether or not you have a sense of the representation in your membership about which members are members that were affected by the 2007 violence, and then those who were potentially perpetrators, or those who were actors in the violence. Because I think it's a bit easy to see those who were affected as wanting to go out and really promote peace, but I'm curious to know a little bit more about your personal experiences in your bunges, about those who maybe have either admitted to say, hey, I was involved in the violence and I want to change this time around, or something to that level. So thank you.
Great question. We'll take a couple more, and then we'll turn to the panel for answers. Up here in the front.
Yeah, Sasha Ross with World Vision. We're also
We have a mic coming.
Sasha Ross with World Vision. We also are partnering with Mercy Corps and the other partners in the Yes Youth Can program. And I just also had a couple of questions regarding instances in this election of violence, and how the National Youth Bunge Association addressed that, where current members of the Yes Youth Can bunges or county youth bunge forums were involved or participating in some way in the violence, if there was instructions that had been given before, and kind of what how you dealt with that during the elections that just passed. And then also to Mercy Corps, kind of looking at the national level of activity that involved, I know you were, Mercy Corps had the national grant and then also involvement at the county level and within the provinces. And I just wonder, looking back at the elections, what was your take on the elections? Do you feel that it was, the funds and the efforts were well invested, and that there was a positive dividend from this youth focus program in the elections themselves that just took place? And what was that from your perspective?
My name is Shams Abdullah. I'm from East Africa also. My question is, what do you see for youth and for the women on the next government, which is coming very soon? Because I see a lot of people are predicting this election, Uhuru Kenyatta will win. Even I feature in my blog, and I was quite shocked, is like how people really, when I feature anything about the youth in my blog, it was like the hit is very huge. So I just want to know what you are thinking about the next government, how will really represent the youth and the women.
Yeah, you say your names so fast, so I was not able to pick any of your names. But let me start with volunteering. I think she was actually giving a scenario of what normally happens. If you've been in Kenya and you've worked with some volunteer youth in Kenya, let me tell you, the reality of things is that they volunteer with the mindset that something is going to come out of it. Yeah, so okay, let's just face the truth. That is how it works. But then again, we are actually moving out from that, because when the program came, they started volunteering, thinking that something will come out of it in terms of, to counter the unemployment. But then again, they grew to like the system, and of course, they are now professional volunteers as we speak. Yeah, so on the Bunge experience on actors and victims, we've had so much interaction between people who come and try to, train guys, and of course bring speakers to talk about how to mitigate conflict, how to bring people together. And we did not want so much to delve into those guys who are pro-actors in the post-election violence, and what actually came out mostly is the victims. And of course, we are not yet there. I know you guys can come up here and say, you know, I took a machete and I did cut someone, but we are not yet there in Kenya. But consciously they get out of it, and you know, you start embracing the fact that we are all Kenyans and we need to work towards a common goal. So we are hoping that things are going to work the way we want, but we didn't go so much into the actors part. I'm not sure if there was any group that went so much into the actors part, and maybe you can just assist me, Grace. Yeah.
We have one group. My name is Grace Karanja. I'm the chief of party for this regional level for Rift Valley and Central Province. And I just want to echo what Silas is saying. You all heard about the Mungeke group. And this was like the mobilized, outlawed group from the Kikuyu community that went out to hit on the enemy that was a Kalenjin. And their real background is in Central Province, in Murang'a County, where I work. The chair who we missed out of on this trip was actually a Mungeke fellow, somebody who has oathed a lot of youth into entering the gang, and who was part of and has confessed to having done some heinous acts. But he has now changed around 300,000 youth in that county, and they're all in the Yes Youth Can movement and doing great things for their communities.
Thank you, Grace, for coming to my rescue on that, because I think I missed that out. Yeah, thank you. So as she said, there were actually some people who came up, but there were not as many as the victims, yeah? So that is why I was saying that we didn't go so much into that part. So on the elections, these gone elections, county board members or village Bunge members participating in violence, I'm not aware of any case. In fact, if anything, we were using the SMS platform, we were using other networks that we had, other communication networks that we had, to make sure that we reported any incidences that would lead into, a chaos. In fact, it's from most of the village Bunge guys were trained. They were given the right tools to report, and I'm very sure what you should have been asking me is, was there any incidents? But essentially, we didn't have a report of any Bunge members participating in acts of violence this time around, never. Unless, of course, somebody has heard of the same, and maybe you need to inform us, like right now.
Okay, to add on what Silas has said, the village Bunges were being trained on the early warning, early response. And in the early warning, early response, the village Bunges was responsible for anything that could happen within the community. And the village Bunge members were acting as the peace monitors in every polling station. So I think there was nothing. Yeah.
Thank you. Sharon, did you want to comment on the question? And then I don't know if Earl, you had thoughts on sort of overall view of the program as well.
Yeah, no, I actually think this is a question answered better by Grace and some of the folks sitting here. You know, your question, if I can sort of try and capture it, was, you know, do we think that the program had an effect on overall levels of political violence, and was it worth it? You know, sort of, and you know, it's very difficult to sort of disentangle those things. I wouldn't say that Yes Youth Can alone, you know, led to much lower levels of violence. There were thousands of actors. We were one of many who were working very, very hard towards, you know, peaceful elections. I think, you know, one of the things that the young people who are here have been telling me is, you know, that this was a very apolitical program. They really didn't care all that much about who won. All they really wanted to see was that this was peaceful, right? That their role in the elections were peaceful. And that's a theme that's been sort of repeated consistently And I do think in looking at a lot of the early warning, early response activities that were done, I think there are very clear instances of young people, sending each other messages, stepping forward, saying, this is not what we want this time. And Elliot, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but some of the SMS messages that were going around right during the election time, I think really did dampen violence. Do you want 2 seconds on that?
Hello, everyone. I'm Ellie Wilkes. I'm the technology advisor for the Yes You Can program with Mercy Corps. One of the things that we did in exactly as Sharon said was regarding the early warning, early response, building the networks out there. It was using the 20,000 youth bunges across the country basically as reporters, right? As people that would help monitor things that would happen, and they would send in indications and say, all right, well, someone is starting to speak in a vernacular language. That is a cause for alarm, right? And so then we would alert appropriate authorities and be able to really, before things were able to escalate, being able to respond very quickly to those needs. One of the other things I think that was very important was, in addition to the peace messaging and other things of that nature, was actually combating hate speech and misinformation and rumors with truth, right? I think that was extraordinarily powerful. In Kenya, you'll notice there's sort of an information divide, right? There is lack of information that gets out to the local and the village level, and being able to, live tweet, live SMS the presidential debates. We received overwhelmingly positive feedback about that because it was just not something that everyone didn't have access to a television or a radio to get concrete firsthand information. So being able to distribute that through technologies that exist in hand was extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah. Just maybe there was one other question that someone asked on youth and women inclusion in the just concluded election, and the fact that a few of them came up. I can only point to flawed primaries. When we were going into elections in Kenya, we started with the primaries. Political parties did their internal elections first before we went into the general elections, and it was the mandate of the political party to do its own activities. I mean, to go through the process of electing their representatives, and that is where everything started going wrong. So much so that if you lost in your primaries, obvious, even if you were the best person, the best choice, it would mean that probably when you came back, you'd have to come back through another party, and probably it was not the most favorite party, Yeah. So eventually, we ended up losing the right women leaders and the right youth leaders that we wanted to come on board because of the flawed primaries that we went through initially. There's also one thing that I did not mention about, and it was my youth, my ID, My Life campaign. It was a very, very successful campaign where we were able to reach out to so many youth, so much so that, in Kenya, if you do not have a national identity card, you have nothing to do. You are not, you can't go to the bank and open an account. You cannot participate. You cannot do anything as such. But we were able to reach out to so many youth. Okay, initially they thought that getting an ID is so difficult, but we were able to come between. We bridged between the necessary government ministry that provided the same and the youth out there because we had the network. So that is one very big score that we had because we bridged so many of them. But then again, at some point, when they were getting their IDs, time for registering for elections was closing in, and quite a number of them again did not participate in the elections. But we are hoping that in the future we'll be able to do that in time enough to make sure that youth participate actively in the elections and they form part of the leadership that we want to bring the change in Kenya. Thank you.
I think it's a really interesting point about the IDs, and again, I think it's emblematic of how, again, this was a very cross-sectoral approach, because when you, as you just mentioned, having an ID is foundational to participating in society on a number of fronts in a number of ways, and I think that's just a really interesting aspect. Earl, I want to give you a chance to sort of comment here on the number of questions that have been raised so far, and in particular, the sort of dividend of the projects from your perspective.
No, I think it would make an interesting case study, not just Yes Youth Can, but the fact that the way that over the years, the last few years, how many civic groups have been mobilized to participate in the electoral process. And Yes Youth Can, as Sharon mentioned, is one of many groups, but it's 1 million strong. And multiply that by the number of groups that have been formed and worked together over the years on the elections. And so I think that it would be an amazing case study on how social networking has been able to bring everyone together for a common cause in multiple facets of the elections. I mean, starting with the 2010 referendum on the Constitution, and then looking at the voter registration process, and looking at, as you mentioned, the peace messaging many, many months before the elections, the early warning and the early response system. And also equally powerful, I think, is the fact that the Kenyans themselves conducted a parallel voting tabulation, which built the confidence of the people in the electoral process. So this would be an amazing case study that we should all look into in future, near future, I hope.
I think you've just inspired me to go do a postdoc. I think we have time for a couple more questions. Sir in the back.
Hi, my name is Kennedy Mugo, and I'm with Save the Children Education in Emergencies. And I'm still not convinced that the Yes Youth Can, I feel like they sort of rode on the wave of the way the political scene was at the time. The fact that this time round, the Kalenjin population and the Kikuyu population were voting as a bloc, and the traditional hotbeds were not places where the places where the voting was very simple. So I feel like you sort of like are riding on a wave that was already existing, and there would probably have been a lot of youth collaboration and would probably have seen peace. And I feel like the money would have been better spent supporting leaders and trying to be less apolitical, but more in touch and more supporting of building structures to help young leaders get into government and offices that will bring about more difference and that will concentrate on youth issues rather than just sending text messages or creating social media, you know? That's just some ideas that are going through my head. Thanks.
Thank you. We'll take 2 more. This woman right here. Yeah, we have a mic coming.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Anelia Tanasova. I'm from Karno Emerging Markets, and I have the following question. I was really impressed by what Silas said about youth trying to influence policies. It means a lot. It's not about only elections, it's about transparency and how governance and government functions. And I would like to ask you, would you please share with us, do you think and do you have any institutional forms of youth participation in governance, like youth councils? So I know that Kenya has a very successful devolution caucus at the parliament, and with these 17 young leaders elected, do you think about creating youth caucus at the parliament? And what is your impression? What is your experience? Is it easier to work at local level or at the national level? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take one more here on the right, and then we'll hopefully get one more round in after that.
Thank you. Yes, Elizabeth Markovich with Winrock International, and I'm representing Yes Youth Can Western Region. So congratulations on successful elections to all of us. So we're very proud, really, of the successes. But you know, as a development professional, I would like to have Mr. Gast and maybe Silas think about, what can we take away of Yes Youth Can, and that we can replicate in other areas of, the Africa or Asia or other places. And I think we have a lot of lessons learned, but also I do have to say that, we were working with a very unusual mission there. And with all of the issues we might have had with USAID Kenya, they did take the risk of this kind of program. And, there's a lot of commitment there. So, what is the combination? What is the sort of formula of going forward in, taking the lessons learned and what we've all done and you guys have done and replicating this?
Thanks. Let's take actually one more because we had a comment. We'll take this young woman in the front.
Hi, thank you speakers for sharing. My name is Anna Tranfalia, and I just had a question. Have either of you guys heard of groups that have partnered so far with sport groups in Kenya, either MISA or Kaifa or athletic-based groups? Because some of those sporting groups have leadership syllabuses that go along with their program, so I was wondering if you've combined efforts, because they have large pools of youth at their disposal as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Silas and Zipporah, if you want to comment on the question about, and the comment about sort of youth policy platforms, institutional platforms, and then we can go to Sharon or Earl on some of the other questions that came up as well.
First of all, let me just address a question by someone who just said that we rode on Kalenjin Kikuyu marriage. Let me tell you, we had started this long ago before Kalenjin and Kikuyu married, if there was any marriage for that matter. And NYBA and the program as a whole, it takes everyone on board. It doesn't take Kalenjin and Kikuyus alone on board. So basically, we have everybody on board. In fact, if anything, the National Youth Bunge Association, if you look at it, it has everybody. At least 2 from every county. And if you come and look at the executive committee, in fact, it has less of those people you are talking about, the Kalenjin and the Kikuyu. If anything, probably we have 1 Kikuyu and 1 Kalenjin. The rest come from the other area that you're saying were not in the marriage. So basically, we are saying NYBA was created on a platform of non-partisanism. So essentially, everything that we did was to make sure that peace prevailed. And whether Kalenjin and Kikuyu married or not, we wanted a peaceful elections. Individual members of that particular, of the NYBA, individual members have their political rights, and they can choose to go wherever they want to go. But that is at the individual level. But when you come to the program, when you come to the structure, you have to follow what is laid down for membership. So actually, when you say that the money would have been redirected to maybe making sure that we have more young leaders, having 17 young leaders, 17 young leaders in the just concluded general election, for us is a big plus, because initially it was the usual suspect, as I said before. It was just a recycling of the same. So we started with 17, and we are very sure that in the next coming elections, probably we'll be having half of the leadership being youth. So I want you to be optimistic that that's the direction the NYBA is going to take, the National Youth Bunge Association, and of course the YYC program as a whole. So when you talk about youth influencing policies, especially policies that concern governance, we've tried to partner. We've tried to partner with the relevant government ministries that are always coming up with these particular policies to ensure that we have our word heard. All the time we sit down, we come up with what we think is the best way forward for the youth in Kenya, and we present our suggestions to the relevant ministries, and so far so good. We started somewhere. You always need to start somewhere. You cannot start at the top. So we believe that in the near future, all the government ministries, including the parliament, will open the doors for the youth in Kenya. So that's what I can say on influencing policies.
Thanks. Sharon, did you say you had a thought on that? And then we can go to Zipporah?
Yeah, just to speak to your question of attribution, I think it's a very fair question. When you look at these kinds of environments and you're trying to disentangle what had an impact and what didn't, I think it's right to ask about retribution. I think it's right to ask those questions. And I think you raised some very important points about some things that may have also led towards a peaceful outcome. I do think the answer, Silas, that gave you, though, is a very good one. This was a very multi-ethnic initiative, and I think it was right to stay apolitical. I mean, one of the things that these two didn't mention is at the start of the program, we faced significant challenges because politicians, did view the program with a very jaded eye, and they sort of looked at it and said, this is sort of, U.S. government efforts to, steer things in directions that we don't like. And so, these kinds of programs do have a very high level of political risk, and I think it was essential that, this program sort of really stay nonpartisan and really not mess around too much in, a lot of these very, very more obviously political activities at the start. That doesn't mean that it can't evolve in those directions over time. But I think, one of the things that we think about as an implementing partner that works with these young people, and one of the lessons we're sort of taking away is, there are tools and skills that probably were needed in greater amounts that I would love to see in future programs. So, for example, when the program was protested initially by a number of different parties, that's hard for seasoned adult negotiators to handle. And so it would be great to get more negotiation and mediation skills into these kinds of programs up front. Another sort of challenging aspect of the program was, since it was so political at the beginning, there was this frame put around it, that it's non-political, it's not a peace-building program, it's not this, it's not that, it's just a youth engagement employment program. When really, I think at its heart, it was about preventing electoral violence. And so being able to be honest about that up front, I think would have made it easier to address some of these issues you raised. But attribution is always hard in these cases, and knowing whether the money would have been better spent another way is just one of those counterfactuals I'm not sure we can ever answer.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Zipporah. I don't know if you had any thoughts on sort of your key takeaways, and then I'm going to sort of ask Earl the same question. But when you think about, even from your village, Bunge, to another village and how that replicates, and also just to follow up on the sports question, I'm just curious if in your community you ever came across sports programs, and then we can bring that also to Sharon and or Earl for their experience with sports programs.
Okay, I think from the community level is that when we were forming the village bunges, it was like we have villages, and in these villages, the youths from that village come together, they form a group, and in this group is where the youths will identify the problems the community is facing. So it is like the parliament, whereby issues are being raised and people look for solutions, and it is in a village manner. So when it is in a village manner, there is that county board. So the problems that are being identified in the village bunge will be taken to the county boards, and the county boards will look at the issues in the villages, and it is a down-up approach. It is not the up-down whatever. It is the bottom up, not the top up. The bottom, the
top down.
Not the top down approach. It is the bottom up approach. So it is something good because the local youth who is in a village will have a voice. Yeah.
Yeah, and then again, they were able to solve most of those problems at the local level before they move it forward to the county level. When it becomes big, and that is where they maybe need to include the county boards. And the same case again happens to the county bodies. If a problem is so big that they cannot handle, because they had constitutions and they would use their constitutions if it was an internal problem, and if it was an external problem, they can solicit assistance from within the community or maybe from within the county. But then if it's a big problem enough to bring it up to the National Youth Bunge Association Board, they would bring that. But not so many of those cases were brought, like up with it. Most of them were solved within the particular level that it was supposed to be tackled.
I think it helped us in trying to think through this program and also apply lessons learned along the way in not only our agency strategy or policy on youth, but also programming. And it's a change of philosophical views, whereas several years ago, others were thinking of the youth bulge as the youth challenge or the youth problem. And now we're thinking about it as the youth opportunity. And that was key in the design of this program, and also very key to how we're thinking about engaging on the continent. And there have been lots of studies written, but I'll just cite one that came out not too long ago, and that was a McKinsey report on job creation in Africa, which says, look at the youth bulge as an opportunity, much what we were saying. And if we focus and get governments to focus on just a few things, the returns are just enormous. And so they cite just 3 or 4 sectors in various economies around the continent, whereas if we concentrate on training, on leadership, and other skills development, we could potentially see a 50% increase in job growth. So, and that of course translates into higher GDP rates in countries that are already experiencing high GDP rates. So it's a philosophical shift in how we look at youth. The second thing is, and something that was touched on at the beginning, in doing a program like this, from the very beginning you have to think to scale. And not think in terms of something that's boutique, a pilot, and build upon it. It really has to be thought from the very beginning of scale. And I think that's something that we want to apply in other areas. Obviously, to build the scale, you need resources, but to think immediately about building the scale. And then the third thing I would say is risks along the way, but one is trusting the local leadership, the Kenyans themselves, the youth groups that we're working with, to take it on. And that's what happened in this. It's risky, and it's a hands-off approach, but for it to be successful, it really does have to be Kenyan-led. It really does have to be led by the youth.
That's great, thank you. We have just a couple minutes, and I wanted to make sure I gave all of our panelists a chance to have a kind of a final comment, and in particular, I'm conscious of, Sharon, I don't know if you, in the diversity of your work, have come across and done work related to sort of sports for peace and development, but if you have, it would be sort of as a parting word, and then I'd love to let Silas and Zipporah have a final comment as well on their thoughts.
Just for final comments, I'd like to echo some of what Earl said. I think there are a lot of things that we've learned in Yes Youth Can that are replicable to other contexts. I think the scale is one, the youth leadership is one, the being cognizant of the risks and giving the young people the tools and skills they need to resolve those problems on their own. All of those things are replicable and very, very important. On youth sport, to touch on your question, Mercy Corps does a lot of youth sport programs. And we have found, some really compelling evidence that young people who are engaged in these kinds of sporting activities develop some of the skills that are so important for success. There's self-confidence and self-worth and healthy behaviors. I don't think Yes Youth Can, Grace, correct me if I'm wrong, you did connect quite a bit with, sorry, then I'm going to let Grace speak to that question. But there are some real dividends to linking up with sports. So.
So Rift Valley is a world of athletes. I think most of them actually come from that region, and some of them also have taken up the peace building as just a flagship of the work they do. Somebody like Cheptiret, who is right from the West Pokot, Elgeyo Marakwet border. We've worked with her tirelessly, first on the young women mentorship, but also in cross-border peace building, because we are working in those 3 counties which are cattle rustling, and they do this almost every other time. So we have worked with her. When you come to Eldoret, and we have a lot of stadiums where these young Kenyans are practicing and are doing some sessions, and have a lot of also people from the West who are now coming to use the same stadiums to just prepare for different kind of events that are happening. We partnered just before elections together with the Champion of Peace, which is still under the CSO group, with the athletes to actually preach peace. And though there was a few of athletes, the athletes too were seen on political platforms with presidential candidates, which had a different notion of what they were doing. We had like 15 of them who ran a peace rally, a peace marathon with us, and came up on the peace caravan to continue preaching peace. So, and one of our local implementer, who is called A-Step, is actually building a stadium in Eldoret, and it's supported by some folks in the athletes to just show how important sport is related to peace building. And this is something they are working on. Thank you.
Just to add to that, I think one of the things that's interesting about the sport, youth and sport space is, it's often referred to as youth sport for peace and development, sort of SPD for short. And I think that's interesting because, to touch on Sharon's point, we see sport often being used for in peace building, but also, as I said, on the development side, in leadership development, life skills, healthy behaviors. Sport programs are often being used in health space and in promoting HIV awareness and prevention through sport. So I think it's a really interesting space that has application. It's a modality, I think, that's increasingly being utilized in a lot of different ways in youth programming. Silas and Zipporah, I wanted to give you a chance to have a final word, and then I will thank and close our session. Zipporah, you want to go first?
Okay, I think my general comment is that we are grateful to the Yes Youth Can program because it has enabled the voice of the youth to be heard. In the past, we could not hear anything the youths are saying. The politicians were the only people who could be heard in the community. But now, through the Yes Youth Can program, we can now hear the voice of the youths. Again, in the Yes Youth Can, we are grateful because they have a gender component whereby here the female have been very much known in the program because they are being, every time the women have been mentored, they did not have any voice as compared to the culture of our country, Kenya. Women did not have a voice. They could not even vie for a leadership position. They could not even stand in front of men. But now I'm proud because I'm a Kenyan woman and I can sit in front of you and talk. So Yes Youth Can has made a very good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think she said it all. Okay. Men are actually becoming an endangered species in Kenya. But rather, they're actually taking over so much so that if we don't stand up and fight hard, okay, it's good for the competition. At least it's now coming up. We'll really stand against you, but not in a bad way, just to make sure that you people continue coming up. But I wanted to say that someone asked me the experiences of working at the county, at the local level and at the national level. And I must say that I started at the local level, and when you are tackling issues that are affecting people at the local level, they have common issues, and it's a bit easier to tackle it at that level than when it comes to the national level, and you have to do an array of different. You have to tackle an array of different difficulties that are experienced within the National Youth Bunge Association. So if you asked me where I would want really to work, I would want to work at the local level, but then again, somebody needs to sit there and work at the national level. So somehow we also find ourselves working up there. So maybe just another comment on the local sports. I mean, using sports as a venue of ensuring that an avenue of ensuring that peace is preached. At the county level, at the national level, we did a number of activities, as she said. But again, most of the activities that we were doing at the local level, very local level, were sporting activities that brought together. They were actually inter-ethnic, and what we were doing is we were not putting one ethnic group in one team and the other ethnic group in the other team. No, it was a mix-up, and at the end of the day, guys were hugging, and you just feel that Kenyan thing in you, not necessarily Kikuyu thing in you and Kalenjin thing in you. For example, in Kenya we have guys who are very good in running, and those are basically the Kalenjin, and we have guys who are very good, for example, in football, and those are like the Bantu speaking Kenyan. So if you put together youth in a football match, you bring Kalenjin who can run very fast, and you bring the Bantu who can manipulate that ball so well. It mixes up so much so that you don't tell. It's always at the end of the day it's just a Kenyan. So we actually used sports so much. Maybe it didn't come out, but we used sports so much to make sure that these people came up together. I want to say that we are very grateful for you guys having us here. I think this is one of the experiences that we'll actually never forget in our lives, hoping that it's actually going to build towards ensuring that Kenya maintains the peace that we want. And then, of course, I know after talking about peace, after making sure that we have contained peace, we are now going towards real democracy, where we are no longer talking about peace, we are talking about the kind of leader that we must put on the map to make sure that we transit Kenya from the level that we are in to a level that is even higher. Thank you so much. Good evening.
Thank you. Well, as always, I feel like we should have left. Should let the young people have the last word so eloquently. And just want to again thank you all for being here. Thanks, Earl. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for traveling all this way to speak to us today. And thank you all for being here and for listening online. It was a great conversation. Thank you.